This is the Pal Talk News Network.
The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes, on YouTube, on Blip TV, and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you're encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not. No retribution. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated to an additional 12 million households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. I welcome you to the show, and I remind you, as I always do at the top of the show, that you should be going to our news site, paltalknewsnetwork.com, paltalknewsnetwork.com. Go there early, go there often, just like voting in Chicago, because the stories are being updated constantly. What you read this morning, and when you come back this afternoon or evening, you'll see that there are a whole bunch of new stories there. Bump those older, staler stories off the front page. And for those of you who are listening on CRN Digital Talk Radio or in any of our many fine internet radio affiliates, if you go to paltalknewsnetwork.com and you click on the Join the Chat button, which is right next to the big TV screen at the top of the web page, it's actually in the corner of the big TV screen, you will be magically transported into our virtual auditorium on Paltalk, where you can participate in this conversation as well and let us know your views on these all-important issues. And there is no charge, which is the best thing about the whole thing. There are a couple of interesting stories in the news today in the legal arena. In Phoenix, the ACLU and a coalition of civil rights groups have filed a class action lawsuit in federal district court challenging Arizona's new law that requires police to demand papers from people they stop who they suspect are not authorized to be in the United States on the grounds that the law is discriminatory and promotes racial profiling. And a whistleblower today filed a lawsuit to force the federal government to halt operations at another massive BP oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico, alleging that BP never reviewed critical engineering designs for the operation and is therefore risking another catastrophic accident that could dwarf the company's Deepwater Horizon spill. And all this afternoon, we have been bringing to you live here on the Pal Talk News Network the U.S. Senate hearing into the spill. And we will stay on top of this story from as many angles as we can find to cover with a degree of authority for you, both here on the Pal Talk News Network site, because it is just a huge story that deserves our attention. Well, the United States Supreme Court today, in the third of the three stories I wanted to discuss, and this is the one I'd like to direct our attention to during the show today, mainly, issued an opinion that allows the federal government to indefinitely imprison convicts considered sexually dangerous even after their prison terms have been completed. So the law says that if you are convicted of this crime, you will serve such and such a length of sentence. They go into the prison after the judge awards them, I guess, the sentence. And then when they've done their time, now if the mental health folks there in the prison system deem them to be sexually dangerous, and I'm not exactly sure what that means, they could say, we're not letting you loose on society. So, of course, we want to protect people, especially our children, from sexual deviants who are predators. Without question, we want that. And I think one of the arguments in support of this ruling, and I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong, but from my reading of it is that once a sexual predator, always a sexual predator. There's really no way to get a person to change their behaviors because they are wired in this manner. Well, we know that there's a high rate of recidivism anyway among sexual predators. But on the other hand, doesn't this potentially lead to abuses in the federal prison system? Sal Lockman wrote a comment today, and Sal's an extremely conservative individual. And he said, this is reminiscent in his mind to the Russian gulags, where, and they do this even today in Russia. Political enemies of the state are deemed to be mentally unstable, and then they are incarcerated. I mean, it's very dangerous, I think. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure I know what the solution to all of this is. Maybe chemical castration. I know that sounds pretty extreme, but there is, I believe, a way to alter a person's desires in that regard through pills or medication. I'm not so sure I believe in, doing that, the old scissors, as some people would suggest. I think it's a tough situation because you want to protect people, especially children, from these known sexual predators. On the other hand, once a person does his time, it's always been in the United States that they've done their time. They've paid their debt to society and they deserve to be released. Maybe the true solution to this would be life with life in prison. Maybe that ought to be debated, and maybe the law should be changed that these sexual predators ought to be sentenced to life in prison if, in fact, it is true that they all leave prison and they continue to have those proclivities, maybe until they reach a certain age. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not an expert in it. But at least that could be debated and it could be the law, but it almost seems to me that the Supreme Court is circumventing the law because there are federal sentencing guidelines that the judges must follow. They follow those guidelines. They can only give them the maximum that's allowed under the guidelines. And then it's extended now, not by a court of law, but by a mental health professional. Karen in the United Kingdom. Karen, welcome to News Talk Online on the Pal Talk News.
Thank you, Gary. We have a problem over here with, I'll call them sexual predators, because they get the most ridiculously short sentences over here when they're allowed out, and they can do exactly the same thing over and over again. If they are given the choice of chemical castration, okay, fair enough,